Brittany, a 26-year-old veterinary assistant, was dealing with a minor car accident when she received a phone call that would test her understanding of legal representation and teach her valuable lessons about personal injury fraud. The caller claimed to represent a law firm that could help her win a large settlement for injuries she didn't even have. Brittany had been involved in a small fender bender 2 weeks earlier where another driver had rear-ended her car at a red light. The damage was minimal. She felt fine after the accident, and both insurance companies were handling the property damage claims without any complications or disputes. Brittany had not sought medical attention because she had no injuries and felt completely normal after the accident. Her car had minor bumper damage that was being repaired through the other driver's insurance company, and she expected the matter to be resolved quickly and easily. The caller, who identified himself as Attorney Mark Sullivan from Sullivan and Associates Personal Injury Law, claimed that Brittany was entitled to substantial compensation for injuries and damages from her car accident that she might not even realize she had sustained. Ms. Jenkins, car accident injuries often don't show symptoms immediately, and you could be suffering from soft tissue damage, whiplash, or other injuries that will cause you pain and medical problems for years to come, Sullivan said with apparent medical and legal knowledge about accident injuries. Sullivan claimed that his law firm specialized in car accident cases and had recovered millions of dollars for accident victims who initially thought they were uninjured but later developed serious medical problems that required expensive treatment and caused lost wages. Ms. Jenkins, insurance companies try to settle accident claims quickly before victims realize the full extent of their injuries, but our firm ensures that you receive the maximum compensation you deserve for both current and future medical expenses. Sullivan continued with apparent insurance company tactics knowledge. Sullivan explained that his firm worked on a contingency fee basis, which meant Brittany wouldn't pay any attorney fees unless they won a settlement for her, but that she needed to retain their services immediately to protect her legal rights before the insurance settlement process concluded. Brittany was confused because she felt completely fine and had no injuries or medical problems from the accident. But Sullivan seemed knowledgeable about accident injuries and legal procedures that she didn't understand as a veterinary assistant. "I don't think I was injured in the accident, and I feel completely fine," Brittany explained to Sullivan. "The insurance companies are already handling the property damage, and I don't think I need legal representation for such a minor accident." Sullivan became more insistent when Brittany expressed reluctance, claiming that many accident victims don't realize they've been injured until weeks or months later when serious symptoms develop that require expensive medical treatment and cause permanent disabilities. "Ms. Jenkins, by the time you realize you've been injured, it will be too late to pursue legal action, and you'll be responsible for all your medical expenses without any compensation from the responsible party," Sullivan warned with apparent legal deadline knowledge and consequence expertise. Sullivan also claimed that the insurance companies were already working to minimize her claim and that she needed professional legal representation to ensure that she received fair compensation for her accident damages and potential future medical needs. Brittany felt pressured by Sullivan's warnings about missed opportunities and potential future problems, but she was also suspicious about the aggressive legal tactics for such a minor accident that had caused no apparent injuries or complications. Brittany decided to research Sullivan and Associates' personal injury law to verify their credentials and reputation before making any decisions about legal representation for her car accident claim. Brittany's online research revealed that Sullivan and Associates' personal injury law was not listed in her state's Bar Association directory and had no legitimate law firm presence or professional credentials that she could verify through official legal sources. Brittany also contacted her state's Bar Association to verify attorney Mark Sullivan's license and learned that no attorney by that name was licensed to practice law in her state, which meant that he was fraudulently claiming to be a lawyer. Brittany contacted her insurance company to ask about the legal representation claims Sullivan had made and learned that legitimate personal injury attorneys don't typically contact accident victims unsolicited and that her claim was being handled appropriately through standard insurance procedures. Brittany realized that Sullivan and Associates was fraudulently claiming to be a law firm and attempting to involve her in unnecessary legal proceedings that could complicate her simple insurance claim and potentially cost her money for legal services she didn't need. Brittany contacted the phone number Sullivan had provided to inform him that she had verified his fraudulent claims. But Sullivan continued to insist that she needed legal representation and pressured her to sign retainer agreements immediately. Brittany reported the legal representation fraud to her state's bar association, the Attorney General's office, and her insurance company's fraud department. She learned that fake personal injury law firms often target car accident victims to create unnecessary legal proceedings and collect legal fees for services that don't benefit clients. The authorities explained that legitimate personal injury attorneys are properly licensed and don't typically contact accident victims through unsolicited phone calls, and that most minor car accidents can be resolved through insurance companies without legal representation. Brittany learned that accident victims should verify attorney credentials through official bar association resources and should be suspicious of any legal services that are offered through unsolicited contact or that pressure victims into immediate legal action for minor accidents. The experience taught Brittany to be cautious about legal representation offers and to work with properly licensed attorneys only when legal representation is actually needed for legitimate legal problems that cannot be resolved through other means. Brittany now educates others about personal injury fraud and emphasizes the importance of verifying attorney credentials and understanding when legal representation is actually necessary for accident claims and other legal matters. Kenneth, a 31-year-old bank teller, was going through a difficult divorce when he received a phone call that would test his knowledge of family law services and teach him valuable lessons about divorce attorney fraud. The caller claimed to specialize in protecting men's rights during divorce proceedings and promised to help him keep his assets and children. Kenneth was indeed going through divorce proceedings and was working with a legitimate family law attorney to negotiate custody arrangements and property division with his estranged wife through the standard legal process established by his state's family court system. Kenneth's divorce was proceeding amicably through mediation, and both he and his wife were committed to reaching fair agreements about custody and asset division that would be in the best interests of their two young children without creating unnecessary conflict or expense. The caller, who identified himself as Attorney David Pierce from Men's Rights Legal Defense, claimed that Kenneth's current attorney wasn't adequately protecting his interests and that he needed specialized legal representation to prevent his wife from taking his assets and limiting his access to his children. Mr. Thompson, divorce courts are biased against men, and without aggressive legal representation that understands these biases, you're going to lose your house, your savings, and meaningful access to your children, Pierce said with apparent family law expertise and gender-biased knowledge. Pierce claimed that Men's Rights Legal Defense specialized in protecting fathers' rights during divorce proceedings and had successfully helped thousands of men maintain custody of their children and protect their financial assets from unfair divorce settlements. Mr. Thompson, your current attorney probably doesn't understand the aggressive tactics that women's divorce attorneys use to manipulate family court judges, but our firm has developed counter-strategies that can protect your rights. Pierce continued with apparent legal strategy knowledge and court procedure expertise. Pierce explained that their specialized divorce defense services required an immediate retainer fee of $8,500 to begin aggressive legal action to protect Kenneth's custody rights and prevent his assets from being unfairly awarded to his wife through biased court proceedings. Kenneth was concerned about protecting his relationship with his children and ensuring fair treatment during his divorce, but he was also suspicious about Pierce's claims that his current attorney wasn't adequately representing his interests in what had been a cooperative process. My divorce is proceeding fairly well through mediation, and I'm working with an attorney who seems competent, Kenneth explained to Pierce. Can you provide specific information about what my current attorney is supposedly doing wrong and references from other clients you've helped? Pierce became aggressive when Kenneth mentioned his current attorney and mediation process, claiming that mediation was a trap that would result in Kenneth losing his rights and that he needed immediate aggressive legal representation to protect his interests. Mr. Thompson, mediation is designed to favor women in divorce proceedings, and your current attorney is allowing you to be manipulated into agreements that will cost you your children and your financial security. Pierce insisted with apparent mediation criticism and legal process warnings. Pierce also claimed that Kenneth's current legal situation was deteriorating rapidly and that he needed to retain Men's Rights Legal Defense within 24 hours to prevent irreversible damage to his custody and financial rights. Kenneth felt confused and pressured by Pierce's claims about problems with his divorce proceedings, but decided to research men's rights legal defense and verify Pierce's credentials before making any changes to his legal representation. Kenneth searched online for men's rights legal defense and discovered that the firm was not listed in his state's Bar Association directory and had no verifiable legal credentials or legitimate law firm presence that he could confirm through official sources. Kenneth also contacted his state's Bar Association to verify attorney David Pierce's license and learned that no attorney by that name was licensed to practice family law in his state, which meant Pierce was fraudulently claiming to be a lawyer. Kenneth consulted with his current family law attorney about Pierce's claims and learned that his divorce proceedings were actually progressing normally, and that mediation was an appropriate and effective method for resolving custody and property issues cooperatively. Kenneth realized that men's rights legal defense was fraudulently claiming to be a law firm and attempting to disrupt his legitimate divorce proceedings to collect unnecessary legal fees for services that would likely complicate rather than improve his situation. Kenneth contacted the phone number Pierce had provided to inform him that his fraudulent claims had been verified, but Pierce continued to insist that Kenneth needed aggressive legal representation and pressured him to change attorneys immediately. Kenneth reported the divorce attorney fraud to his state's Bar Association, the Attorney General's office, and his family court's administrative office. He learned that fake legal service scams often target people during stressful life events like divorce when they may be more vulnerable to claims about inadequate legal representation. The authorities explained that legitimate family law attorneys provide clear information about their credentials and legal strategies and don't typically contact potential clients through unsolicited phone calls with claims about inadequate representation by other attorneys. Kenneth learned that people going through divorce should work with properly licensed family law attorneys and should be suspicious of any legal services that are offered through unsolicited contact or that claim other attorneys are providing inadequate representation. The experience taught Kenneth to verify attorney credentials through official Bar Association resources and to be cautious about legal advice that contradicts the guidance provided by properly licensed attorneys who are familiar with his actual legal situation. Kenneth now educates other men going through divorce about legal service fraud and emphasizes the importance of working with licensed family law attorneys while being skeptical of companies that claim specialized expertise in protecting men's rights through aggressive legal tactics. Angela, a 35-year-old medical technologist, was worried about her elderly mother's finances when she received a phone call that would test her understanding of elder law services and teach her valuable lessons about guardianship fraud. The caller claimed her mother needed immediate legal protection from financial exploitation and family interference. Angela's mother, Dorothy, was 79 years old and lived in an assisted living facility where she participated in activities and maintained her independence while receiving help with daily tasks like medication management and meal preparation. Dorothy remained mentally competent and made her own financial decisions with occasional input from Angela, who helped her understand complex paperwork and technology, but respected her mother's autonomy and decision-making abilities. The caller, who identified himself as attorney Robert Hayes from Elder Protection Legal Services, claimed that Dorothy was at serious risk for financial exploitation and needed immediate guardianship proceedings to protect her assets from scammers and potentially exploitative family members. Ms. Wilson, your mother Dorothy is extremely vulnerable to financial exploitation because of her age and living situation, and we need to establish legal guardianship immediately to protect her assets before she becomes a victim of financial abuse, Hayes said with apparent elder law expertise and protection urgency. Hayes claimed that Elder Protection Legal Services specialized in emergency guardianship proceedings and had successfully protected thousands of seniors from financial exploitation by establishing legal protections that prevented unauthorized access to their assets and financial accounts. Ms. Wilson, seniors in assisted living facilities are prime targets for financial exploitation, and without proper legal guardianship, your mother could lose her life savings to scammers or caregivers who gain her trust and manipulate her into making poor financial decisions. Hayes continued with apparent senior vulnerability knowledge. Hayes explained that emergency guardianship proceedings could be initiated immediately for a legal fee of $5,500, which would establish Angela as her mother's legal guardian with authority to protect Dorothy's assets and make financial decisions on her behalf. Angela was concerned about protecting her mother from potential exploitation, but was also confused because Dorothy remained mentally competent and had not expressed any concerns about financial safety or her ability to manage her own affairs. "My mother is still mentally competent and making her own decisions," Angela explained to Hayes. "I don't think guardianship is necessary unless there are specific problems or threats that I'm not aware of. Can you provide information about what exploitation risks you're claiming exist?" Hayes became more insistent when Angela questioned the necessity of guardianship, claiming that waiting for obvious signs of exploitation would be too late to protect Dorothy's assets, and that preventive legal action was essential for comprehensive protection. "Ms. Wilson, by the time financial exploitation becomes obvious, the damage is usually already done and the assets are gone," Hayes warned with apparent exploitation timeline knowledge and preventive legal strategy expertise. Emergency guardianship is the only way to ensure complete protection before any problems develop. Hayes also claimed that Dorothy's assisted living situation made guardianship particularly urgent because facility staff and other residents could potentially influence her financial decisions or gain access to her personal information and financial accounts. Angela felt pressured by Hayes's warnings about potential exploitation, but her professional healthcare experience had taught her that competent adults should maintain their autonomy unless there are clear signs of cognitive impairment or exploitation that would justify guardianship proceedings. Angela decided to research elder protection legal services and guardianship laws before making any decisions about legal proceedings that would affect her mother's legal rights and autonomy. Angela's research revealed that guardianship is a serious legal proceeding that removes an individual's legal rights and should only be pursued when there is clear evidence of incapacity or ongoing exploitation that cannot be addressed through less restrictive alternatives. Angela also discovered that elder protection legal services was not listed in her state's Bar Association directory and that attorney Robert Hayes was not licensed to practice elder law in her state, which meant he was fraudulently claiming legal credentials. Angela contacted an elder law attorney recommended by her state's Bar Association to discuss her mother's situation and learned that Dorothy's circumstances didn't warrant guardianship proceedings and that competent seniors should maintain their legal autonomy. Angela realized that elder protection legal services was fraudulently claiming elder law expertise and attempting to initiate unnecessary guardianship proceedings that would remove her mother's legal rights and generate legal fees for services that weren't needed or appropriate. Angela contacted Elder Protection Legal Services to inform Hayes that his fraudulent claims had been verified, but he continued to insist that Dorothy needed immediate legal protection and pressured Angela to authorize guardianship proceedings. Angela reported the guardianship fraud to her state's Bar Association, the Attorney General's office, and her mother's Assisted Living Facilities Administration. She learned that fake elder law scams often target adult children who are concerned about protecting elderly parents from potential exploitation. The authorities explained that legitimate guardianship proceedings are initiated only when necessary and involve proper court procedures, psychological evaluations, and evidence of incapacity or exploitation that justifies removing an individual's legal rights. Angela learned that families should consult with properly licensed elder law attorneys about guardianship only when there are clear signs of cognitive impairment or ongoing exploitation that cannot be addressed through less restrictive protective measures. The experience taught Angela to protect her mother's autonomy while remaining vigilant for actual signs of exploitation and to work with licensed elder law attorneys only when guardianship or other legal interventions are genuinely necessary. Angela now educates other families about guardianship fraud and emphasizes respecting elderly relatives' autonomy while being suspicious of legal services that create artificial urgency about guardianship proceedings for competent seniors. Marcus, a 40-year-old plumber, was dealing with a workplace injury claim when he received a phone call that would test his understanding of workers' compensation law and teach him valuable lessons about workers' comp attorney fraud. The caller claimed he was missing out on benefits he deserved and needed immediate legal representation. Marcus had injured his back at work 3 months earlier while lifting heavy pipes and had filed a workers' compensation claim through his employer's insurance system. His claim had been approved, and he was receiving medical treatment and temporary disability payments while recovering from his injury. Marcus was working with his employer and the workers' compensation insurance carrier to coordinate his medical care and return-to-work planning, and the process was proceeding smoothly without any disputes or complications that would require legal intervention. The caller, who identified himself as Attorney Stephen Clark from Workers' Rights Legal Group, claimed that Marcus was not receiving the full benefits he was entitled to, and that his employer's insurance company was taking advantage of him by minimizing his claim. Mr. Patterson, workers' compensation insurance companies routinely underpay injured workers and pressure them to return to work before they're fully recovered, Clark said with apparent workers' compensation expertise and insurance company tactics knowledge. You need aggressive legal representation to ensure you receive maximum compensation for your injury and future medical needs. Clark claimed that Workers' Rights Legal Group specialized in workers' compensation cases and had recovered millions of dollars in additional benefits for injured workers whose claims had been undervalued by insurance companies and employers. Mr. Patterson, most injured workers don't understand their legal rights and accept whatever the insurance company offers. But our firm knows how to fight for the full compensation you deserve, Clark continued with apparent legal rights knowledge and advocacy expertise. Clark explained that his firm could immediately begin legal action to increase Marcus's benefits and ensure maximum compensation for his injury, medical expenses, and lost wages, but that immediate legal representation was essential to protect his rights before the insurance company finalized his claim. Marcus was interested in ensuring he received appropriate compensation for his injury, but was confused because his workers' compensation process was proceeding smoothly and he hadn't encountered any problems with his employer or the insurance carrier. My workers' comp claim seems to be going fine, and I'm getting medical treatment and disability payments, Marcus explained to Clark. What specific problems do you think exist with my claim that would require legal representation? Clark became more aggressive when Marcus expressed satisfaction with his current workers' compensation process, claiming that Marcus was being manipulated by his employer and insurance company into accepting inadequate benefits that wouldn't cover his long-term medical needs. Mr. Patterson, your employer and their insurance company are working together to minimize your claim and get you back to work before you're fully recovered so they can avoid paying for your ongoing medical treatment, Clark insisted with apparent conspiracy knowledge and employer tactics expertise. Clark also claimed that workers' compensation cases had strict deadlines for legal intervention and that Marcus would lose his opportunity for additional compensation if he didn't retain legal representation within 48 hours of their initial contact. Marcus felt concerned about potentially missing benefits he deserved, but decided to research Workers' Rights Legal Group and verify Clark's claims about problems with his workers' compensation process before making any decisions about legal representation. Marcus contacted his state's Workers' Compensation Board to verify his claim status and learned that his case was proceeding normally through standard procedures and that no legal intervention was necessary or beneficial for his situation. Marcus also researched Workers' Rights Legal Group online and discovered that the firm was not listed in his state's Bar Association directory and had no verifiable legal credentials or legitimate law firm presence. Marcus contacted his state's Bar Association to verify attorney Stephen Clark's license and learned that no attorney by that name was licensed to practice workers' compensation law in his state, confirming that Clark was fraudulently claiming legal credentials. Marcus realized that Workers' Rights Legal Group was fraudulently claiming to be a law firm and attempting to interfere with his legitimate workers' compensation process to collect unnecessary legal fees for services that wouldn't benefit his situation. Marcus contacted Workers' Rights Legal Group to inform Clark that his fraudulent claims had been verified, but Clark continued to insist that Marcus needed legal representation and pressured him to sign retainer agreements immediately. Marcus reported the workers' compensation attorney fraud to his state's Bar Association, the Attorney General's office, and the Workers' Compensation Board's fraud division. He learned that fake legal service scams often target injured workers who may be unfamiliar with workers' compensation procedures. The authorities explained that legitimate workers' compensation cases often don't require legal representation and that injured workers should be suspicious of attorneys who contact them unsolicited with claims about inadequate benefits or employer manipulation. Marcus learned that injured workers should verify their claim status through official workers' compensation channels and should work with properly licensed attorneys only when legitimate disputes arise that cannot be resolved through standard administrative procedures. The experience taught Marcus to be cautious about legal representation, offers that claim problems exist with legitimate workers' compensation processes, and to verify attorney credentials before making any commitments to legal services. Marcus now educates other workers about workers' compensation fraud and emphasizes the importance of understanding legitimate workers' comp procedures while being skeptical of attorneys who create artificial urgency about legal representation needs. Jennifer, a 37-year-old pharmacy technician, was concerned about her teenage daughter's situation when she received a phone call that would test her understanding of juvenile law services and teach her valuable lessons about family legal fraud. The caller claimed her daughter was in serious legal trouble that required immediate professional representation. Jennifer's 16-year-old daughter Madison was a good student who occasionally got in minor trouble at school for things like talking in class or forgetting homework, but she had never been involved in any serious behavioral problems or legal issues that would require attorney involvement. Jennifer maintained open communication with Madison and was involved in her school activities and social life. She would have known if Madison was facing any serious problems that required legal intervention or professional assistance from attorneys or other legal professionals. The caller, who identified himself as Attorney William Hayes from Juvenile Defense Legal Services, claimed that Madison had been charged with shoplifting and vandalism and needed immediate legal representation to avoid serious consequences that could affect her future educational and career opportunities. Ms. Rodriguez, your daughter Madison has been charged with retail theft and property damage, and without immediate legal representation, she faces consequences that could include juvenile detention and a permanent criminal record, Hayes said with apparent juvenile law expertise and consequence knowledge. Hayes claimed that Juvenile Defense Legal Services specialized in protecting teenagers from harsh juvenile justice penalties and had successfully helped thousands of young people avoid criminal records and detention through aggressive legal defense strategies. Ms. Rodriguez, juvenile courts can be very harsh on teenagers, especially for property crimes, and without experienced legal representation, Madison could face detention, community service, and a criminal record that will follow her for life. Hayes continued with apparent juvenile justice system knowledge. Hayes explained that immediate legal representation was essential to protect Madison's rights and future opportunities, and that their specialized juvenile defense services required a retainer fee of $4,500 to begin working on her case immediately. Jennifer was alarmed by the serious charges Hayes described and wanted to help Madison immediately, but she was also confused because Madison had not mentioned any problems with law enforcement or legal issues during their daily conversations. I need to speak with my daughter about this situation before making any decisions about legal representation, Jennifer explained to Hayes. Madison hasn't mentioned any problems with police or legal issues, so I want to understand what's happening before hiring an attorney. Hayes became more insistent when Jennifer expressed uncertainty, claiming that juvenile legal matters were often kept secret from parents until formal charges were filed, and that immediate legal representation was essential to protect Madison's rights during police questioning and court proceedings. Ms. Rodriguez, teenagers often don't tell their parents about legal problems because they're afraid of getting in trouble, but delay in obtaining legal representation can seriously harm their defense options, Hayes warned with apparent juvenile behavior knowledge and legal timeline expertise. Hayes also claimed that juvenile cases moved quickly through the legal system, and that Jennifer had only 24 hours to retain legal representation before Madison's rights would be compromised by inadequate legal protection during court proceedings. Jennifer felt pressured by Hayes' urgency claims, but decided to contact Madison directly and verify whether she was actually facing any legal problems or had been contacted by law enforcement about criminal charges. Jennifer spoke with Madison immediately and learned that her daughter had no knowledge of any criminal charges and had never been contacted by police or court officials about shoplifting, vandalism, or any other legal matters. Madison was confused and concerned about Hayes' claims, but confirmed that she had not been involved in any criminal activities and had not authorized anyone to represent her in any legal proceedings. Jennifer also contacted Madison's school and local police department to verify whether any charges had been filed against her daughter and learned that no such charges existed in any law enforcement or court databases. Jennifer realized that Juvenile Defense Legal Services was fraudulently claiming that her daughter was facing criminal charges and attempting to collect retainer fees for legal representation that wasn't needed because no criminal case actually existed. Jennifer contacted Juvenile Defense Legal Services to confront Hayes about the fraudulent charges, but he continued to insist that Madison was facing serious legal problems and pressured Jennifer to pay the retainer fee immediately. Jennifer reported the juvenile legal representation fraud to her state's bar association, the Attorney General's office, and local law enforcement. She learned that fake legal service scams often target parents by claiming their children are facing serious legal problems requiring immediate expensive legal representation. The authorities explained that legitimate juvenile legal proceedings involve official notifications to parents and established court procedures, and that parents should always verify any claims about criminal charges through official law enforcement and court channels. Jennifer learned that parents should verify all legal claims about their children through official sources and should work with properly licensed juvenile attorneys only when legitimate legal problems are confirmed through official law enforcement and court communications. The experience taught Jennifer to be suspicious of unsolicited legal service offers claiming urgent family legal problems and to verify all legal claims through official channels before making commitments to professional legal representation. Jennifer now educates other parents about juvenile legal fraud and emphasizes the importance of verifying all legal claims through official law enforcement and court channels while working only with licensed attorneys for legitimate legal matters. Christopher, a 29-year-old electrician, was starting a small business when he received a phone call that would test his understanding of business law services and teach him valuable lessons about corporate legal fraud. The caller claimed his new business faced regulatory violations that required immediate legal intervention to avoid serious penalties. Christopher had recently started his electrical contracting business and had carefully followed all licensing requirements, business registration procedures, and regulatory compliance guidelines to ensure his business operated legally and professionally. Christopher had obtained his electrical contractor license, registered his business with state and local authorities, secured appropriate insurance coverage, and filed all required tax and regulatory documents to maintain good standing with all applicable government agencies. The caller, who identified himself as attorney Michael Torres from Business Compliance Legal Group, claimed that Christopher's business had been flagged for multiple regulatory violations that could result in substantial fines, license suspension, and business closure if not addressed immediately. Mr. Johnson, your electrical contracting business is facing serious regulatory violations related to licensing compliance, safety regulations, and business registration requirements, Torres said with apparent business law expertise and regulatory knowledge. Without immediate legal representation, you face penalties exceeding $50,000 and potential license revocation that would force you to close your business. Torres claimed that Business Compliance Legal Group specialized in regulatory defense for small businesses and had successfully helped hundreds of contractors resolve compliance violations and avoid business-threatening penalties through aggressive legal advocacy with regulatory agencies. Mr. Johnson, regulatory agencies are cracking down on small contractors, and without experienced legal representation, you'll be overwhelmed by the complex procedures and documentation requirements needed to resolve these violations. Torres continued with apparent regulatory procedure knowledge. Torres explained that immediate legal representation was essential to negotiate with regulatory agencies and minimize penalties, and that their specialized business defense services required a retainer fee of $6,500 to begin working on Christopher's case immediately. Christopher was alarmed by the regulatory violation claims, but was also suspicious because he had been careful about compliance and had never received any communications from regulatory agencies about violations or enforcement actions against his business. I've been careful about following all regulations and haven't received any notices about violations, Christopher explained to Torres. Can you provide specific information about which agencies reported these violations and what regulations my business is supposedly violating? Torres became evasive when Christopher requested specific violation information, claiming that regulatory case details were confidential until legal representation was established and that Christopher needed to retain their services immediately to access information about his violations. Mr. Johnson, due to attorney-client privilege and regulatory investigation procedures, I cannot share specific violation details until your business formally retains our legal services, Torres explained with apparent legal confidentiality and regulatory procedure requirements. Torres also claimed that regulatory enforcement timelines were accelerated for Christopher's violations and that he had only 48 hours to retain legal representation before automatic penalties and license suspension proceedings would begin. Christopher felt pressured by Torres's urgency claims, but decided to contact the regulatory agencies Torres had mentioned to verify whether his business actually had any pending violations or enforcement actions. Christopher contacted his state's electrical licensing board, business registration office, and occupational safety agencies and learned that his business had no pending violations, investigations, or enforcement actions and was in good standing with all regulatory requirements. Christopher also researched Business Compliance Legal Group online and discovered that the firm was not listed in his state's Bar Association directory and had no legitimate legal credentials or business presence. Christopher contacted his state's Bar Association to verify attorney Michael Torres's license and learned that no attorney by that name was licensed to practice business law in his state, confirming that Torres was fraudulently claiming legal credentials. Christopher realized that Business Compliance Legal Group was fraudulently claiming to be a law firm and attempting to create false urgency about regulatory violations to collect unnecessary legal fees for services addressing non-existent business problems. Christopher contacted Business Compliance Legal Group to inform Torres that his fraudulent claims had been verified, but Torres continued to insist that Christopher's business faced serious regulatory problems and pressured him for immediate legal representation. Christopher reported the business legal service fraud to his state's Bar Association, the Attorney General's office, and the regulatory agencies that Torres had falsely claimed were investigating his business. The authorities explained that legitimate business legal services involve licensed attorneys who provide clear information about actual legal problems and that business owners should verify all regulatory compliance issues through official agency channels. Christopher learned that business owners should maintain good relationships with regulatory agencies and should be suspicious of any legal services that claim urgent regulatory problems without official agency notification or documentation. The experience taught Christopher to verify all legal claims through official regulatory channels and to work with properly licensed business attorneys only when legitimate legal problems are confirmed through official agency communications. Christopher now educates other small business owners about business legal fraud and emphasizes the importance of maintaining regulatory compliance while being skeptical of legal services that create artificial urgency about compliance violations. Patricia, a 42-year-old office manager, was going through a custody dispute when she received a phone call that would test her understanding of family law and teach her valuable lessons about child custody fraud. The caller claimed to specialize in helping mothers win custody battles and promised to ensure she would keep her children. Patricia was indeed involved in custody negotiations with her ex-husband following their recent divorce, but they were working through family mediation to reach agreements about custody and visitation schedules that would be in their children's best interests. Patricia's divorce had been difficult but not hostile, and both she and her ex-husband were committed to maintaining stable relationships with their two children and reaching custody arrangements that would minimize disruption to the children's lives and school activities. The caller, who identified herself as attorney Lisa Morgan from Mother's Rights Legal Defense, claimed that Patricia's current family law attorney wasn't adequately protecting her maternal rights and that she needed specialized legal representation to prevent her ex-husband from gaining primary custody of the children. Ms. Davis, family courts often favor fathers in custody disputes, and without aggressive legal representation that understands these biases, you could lose primary custody of your children to your ex-husband, Morgan said with apparent family court knowledge and gender bias expertise. Morgan claimed that Mother's Rights Legal Defense specialized in protecting mothers' custody rights, and had successfully helped thousands of women maintain custody of their children through aggressive legal strategies that general family law attorneys couldn't provide. Ms. Davis, your current attorney probably doesn't understand the specific tactics needed to protect mothers in custody battles, but our firm has developed proven strategies for ensuring that mothers maintain primary custody and that fathers receive only limited visitation rights. Morgan continued with apparent custody strategy knowledge. Morgan explained that their specialized maternal custody protection services required an immediate retainer fee of $7,500 to begin aggressive legal action to protect Patricia's custody rights and prevent her children from being placed primarily with their father. Patricia was concerned about maintaining strong relationships with her children, but was also suspicious about Morgan's claims that her current attorney wasn't adequately representing her interests in what had been a cooperative mediation process. My custody negotiations are proceeding fairly well through mediation, and both my ex-husband and I want what's best for our children, Patricia explained to Morgan. Can you provide specific information about what problems you think exist with my current legal representation? Morgan became more insistent when Patricia mentioned cooperative mediation, claiming that mediation was designed to favor fathers and that Patricia was being manipulated into custody arrangements that would ultimately result in losing her children. Ms. Davis, mediation sounds cooperative, but it's actually a trap that allows fathers to manipulate mothers into giving up their custody rights through emotional manipulation and false promises about shared parenting. Morgan warned with apparent mediation criticism and manipulation tactics knowledge. Morgan also claimed that Patricia's custody situation was deteriorating rapidly and that she needed to retain mother's rights legal defense within 24 hours to prevent irreversible damage to her maternal rights and relationship with her children. Patricia felt confused and pressured by Morgan's claims about problems with her custody proceedings, but decided to research mother's rights legal defense and verify Morgan's credentials before making any changes to her legal representation. Patricia searched online for mother's rights legal defense and discovered that the firm was not listed in her state's Bar Association directory and had no verifiable legal credentials or legitimate law firm presence. Patricia contacted her state's Bar Association to verify attorney Lisa Morgan's license and learned that no attorney by that name was licensed to practice family law in her state, which meant Morgan was fraudulently claiming to be a lawyer. Patricia consulted with her current family law attorney about Morgan's claims and learned that her custody mediation was actually progressing appropriately and that cooperative mediation was often the most effective method for resolving custody issues without creating unnecessary conflict. Patricia realized that mother's rights legal defense was fraudulently claiming to be a law firm and attempting to disrupt her legitimate custody proceedings to collect unnecessary legal fees for services that would likely harm rather than help her custody situation. Patricia contacted the phone number Morgan had provided to inform her that the fraudulent claims had been verified, but Morgan continued to insist that Patricia needed aggressive legal representation and pressured her to change attorneys immediately. Patricia reported the custody attorney fraud to her state's Bar Association, the Attorney General's office, and her family court's administrative office. She learned that fake legal service scams often target parents during custody disputes when they may be more vulnerable to claims about inadequate legal representation. The authorities explained that legitimate family law attorneys provide clear information about their credentials and legal strategies and don't contact potential clients through unsolicited phone calls with claims about inadequate representation by other licensed attorneys. Patricia learned that parents involved in custody disputes should work with properly licensed family law attorneys and should be suspicious of any legal services offered through unsolicited contact that claim other attorneys are providing inadequate representation. The experience taught Patricia to verify attorney credentials through official Bar Association resources and to be cautious about legal advice that contradicts guidance provided by properly licensed attorneys familiar with her actual legal situation. Patricia now educates other parents about custody legal fraud and emphasizes the importance of working with licensed family law attorneys while being skeptical of companies claiming specialized expertise in protecting parental rights through aggressive legal tactics. Daniel, a 34-year-old construction manager, was dealing with a contract dispute when he received a phone call that would test his understanding of business litigation and teach him valuable lessons about commercial legal fraud. The caller claimed to specialize in construction law and promised to help him win a large settlement from a difficult client. Daniel was having payment issues with a commercial client who was disputing the quality of work his construction company had completed on an office renovation project, but the dispute was being resolved through normal business channels and didn't appear to require legal intervention. Daniel had been working with the client and project architect to address the quality concerns and reach a fair resolution that would satisfy everyone involved while maintaining his company's reputation for professional construction services. The caller, who identified himself as Attorney James Mitchell from Construction Legal Solutions, claimed that Daniel's client was trying to avoid payment through frivolous quality complaints and that aggressive legal action was necessary to collect the full contract amount plus damages for the client's bad faith behavior. Mr. Wilson, construction clients often use quality complaints as excuses to avoid paying contractors, and without aggressive legal representation, you'll end up losing money on legitimate work that you've already completed, Mitchell said with apparent construction law expertise and client tactics knowledge. Mitchell claimed that Construction Legal Solutions specialized in helping contractors collect payments from difficult clients and had recovered millions of dollars for construction companies through aggressive litigation strategies that general business attorneys couldn't provide. Mr. Wilson, construction law is highly specialized, and most attorneys don't understand the specific legal strategies needed to force clients to pay contractors for completed work. Mitchell continued with apparent construction industry legal expertise. Mitchell explained that his firm could immediately file legal action against Daniel's client to collect the full contract amount plus additional damages for lost time and reputation harm, but that immediate legal representation was essential to protect Daniel's rights before the client could file counterclaims. Daniel was interested in collecting payment for his work, but was concerned about escalating a dispute that seemed resolvable through normal business discussions, and he was suspicious about Mitchell's aggressive approach to what had been a manageable business disagreement. "I think we can resolve this dispute through normal business channels," Daniel explained to Mitchell. "Can you provide information about your firm's credentials and success rates with construction payment disputes?" Mitchell became more aggressive when Daniel expressed reluctance about litigation, claiming that construction clients would take advantage of contractors who didn't pursue aggressive legal action and that delay would result in complete loss of payment. "Mr. Wilson, construction clients will walk all over contractors who don't fight back legally. And if you don't take immediate legal action, this client will never pay you and will damage your reputation with other potential clients," Mitchell warned with apparent client behavior knowledge. Mitchell also claimed that construction litigation had strict deadlines and that Daniel would lose his opportunity to collect payment if he didn't retain legal representation within 48 hours of their initial contact. Daniel felt pressured but decided to research Construction Legal Solutions and verify Mitchell's credentials before making decisions about litigation that could escalate his business dispute unnecessarily. Daniel's research revealed that Construction Legal Solutions was not listed in his state's Bar Association directory and had no verifiable legal credentials or legitimate law firm presence. Daniel contacted his state's Bar Association to verify Attorney James Mitchell's license and learned that no attorney by that name was licensed to practice construction law in his state. Daniel also consulted with his business insurance agent about the payment dispute and learned that his general liability policy included coverage for legal consultation if needed, and that most construction payment disputes could be resolved without litigation. Daniel realized that Construction Legal Solutions was fraudulently claiming construction law expertise and attempting to escalate his manageable business dispute to collect unnecessary legal fees for services that could harm his business relationships. Daniel contacted Construction Legal Solutions to inform Mitchell that his fraudulent claims had been verified, but Mitchell continued to pressure him about missed opportunities and warned that his client would never pay without aggressive legal action. Daniel reported the construction legal fraud to his state's Bar Association and Attorney General's office. He learned that fake legal service scams often target small business owners during business disputes when they may be more receptive to claims about aggressive legal representation. The authorities explained that legitimate construction law attorneys are properly licensed and provide realistic guidance about dispute resolution options rather than immediately recommending expensive litigation for manageable business disagreements. Daniel learned that business owners should attempt to resolve disputes through normal business channels and should work with properly licensed attorneys only when litigation is actually necessary and beneficial for their business interests. The experience taught Daniel to verify attorney credentials and be cautious about legal advice that immediately recommends expensive litigation for business disputes that might be resolvable through negotiation. Daniel now educates other contractors about legal service fraud and emphasizes resolving business disputes appropriately while working only with licensed attorneys for legitimate legal needs. Nancy, a 48-year-old hospital administrator, was concerned about her aging mother's legal affairs when she received a phone call that would test her understanding of probate law and teach her valuable lessons about estate administration fraud. The caller claimed her mother's estate planning was inadequate and required immediate legal intervention. Nancy's mother, Helen, was 76 years old and lived independently in her own home where she managed her daily activities and financial affairs without assistance. Helen had basic estate planning documents, including a will and power of attorney that had been prepared by a legitimate attorney several years earlier. Nancy stayed in regular contact with her mother and occasionally helped her with technology and complex paperwork, but Helen remained mentally sharp and capable of making her own decisions about legal and financial matters without requiring guardianship or other legal interventions. The caller, who identified himself as Attorney Stephen Clark from Estate Protection Legal Services, claimed that Helen's current estate planning was inadequate and that her assets were vulnerable to probate complications and potential state seizure if not protected through immediate legal action. Ms. Mitchell, your mother's estate planning documents are outdated and don't provide adequate protection against probate delays and asset seizure that could eliminate her inheritance completely, Clark said with apparent estate law expertise and probate risk knowledge. Clark claimed that Estate Protection Legal Services specialized in advanced estate planning and had successfully protected millions of dollars in estate assets for families who had updated their legal documents through their comprehensive asset protection program. Ms. Mitchell, basic wills and powers of attorney don't provide sufficient protection in today's complex legal environment, and without proper estate protection, your mother's assets could be tied up in probate for years or lost entirely. Clark continued with apparent estate planning complexity knowledge. Clark explained that their emergency estate protection program could immediately establish protective trusts and legal safeguards for Helen's assets for a legal fee of $6,500, which would ensure that her inheritance would be preserved and distributed according to her wishes. Nancy was concerned about protecting her mother's estate, but was also suspicious about the unsolicited legal advice and claims about inadequacy of Helen's existing estate planning documents that had been prepared by a legitimate attorney. My mother already has estate planning documents that were prepared by a licensed attorney, Nancy explained to Clark. Can you provide specific information about what additional legal protections you think are necessary and references from other families you've helped? Clark became more insistent when Nancy mentioned existing estate planning, claiming that most attorneys didn't understand advanced asset protection strategies and that Helen's current documents provided inadequate protection against modern estate planning challenges. Ms. Mitchell, general practice attorneys don't understand the sophisticated estate planning techniques needed to protect assets in today's legal environment, and your mother's basic documents leave her vulnerable to asset loss, Clark warned with apparent attorney limitation knowledge. Clark also claimed that estate protection opportunities were time-sensitive and that Nancy needed to authorize immediate legal action to protect Helen's assets before potential creditors or state agencies could claim them through probate proceedings. Nancy felt pressured by Clark's warnings about asset vulnerability, but decided to research Estate Protection Legal Services and verify Clark's credentials before making any decisions about additional estate planning services for her mother. Nancy's research revealed that Estate Protection Legal Services was not listed in her state's Bar Association directory and had no legitimate legal credentials or verifiable law firm presence. Nancy contacted her state's Bar Association to verify attorney Stephen Clark's license and learned that no attorney by that name was licensed to practice estate law in her state. Nancy also consulted with the attorney who had prepared Helen's original estate planning documents and learned that Helen's will and power of attorney were adequate for her situation and that no additional legal protections were necessary. Nancy realized that estate protection legal services was fraudulently claiming estate law expertise and attempting to create false urgency about estate planning inadequacies to collect unnecessary legal fees for services that wouldn't benefit her mother's situation. Nancy contacted Estate Protection Legal Services to inform Clark that his fraudulent claims had been verified, but he continued to insist that Helen's estate needed immediate protection and pressured Nancy to authorize legal services immediately. Nancy reported the estate planning fraud to her state's Bar Association and Attorney General's office. She learned that fake estate planning scams often target adult children concerned about protecting elderly parents' assets through claims about inadequate legal protection. The authorities explained that legitimate estate planning attorneys provide clear information about their credentials and services and don't contact families through unsolicited phone calls with claims about urgent estate protection needs. Nancy learned that families should work with properly licensed estate planning attorneys and should verify all legal advice through official Bar Association resources rather than responding to unsolicited legal service offers. The experience taught Nancy to protect her mother's interests by working with legitimate attorneys while being suspicious of legal services that create artificial urgency about estate planning inadequacies. Nancy now educates other families about estate planning fraud and emphasizes working with licensed attorneys while being skeptical of companies claiming urgent estate protection needs for competent seniors. Gregory, a 38-year-old bank manager, was dealing with employment issues when he received a phone call that would test his understanding of employment law and teach him valuable lessons about workplace legal fraud. The caller claimed he was experiencing illegal workplace discrimination that required immediate legal action. Gregory had been having some disagreements with his supervisor about work assignments and scheduling, but these seemed like normal workplace communication issues that could be resolved through discussion with human resources rather than legal intervention. Gregory enjoyed his work at the bank and had good relationships with most of his colleagues and customers. While he sometimes disagreed with management decisions, he had not experienced what he considered to be illegal discrimination or harassment that would require legal action. The caller, who identified herself as Attorney Jennifer Walsh from Employment Rights Legal Group, claimed that Gregory was experiencing workplace discrimination based on his age and position and that immediate legal action was necessary to protect his employment rights and secure compensation. Mr. Adams, based on information about your workplace situation, you're experiencing age discrimination and retaliation that violates federal employment laws, Walsh said with apparent employment law expertise and discrimination identification knowledge. Without immediate legal representation, your employer will continue these illegal practices and may terminate your employment. Walsh claimed that Employment Rights Legal Group specialized in protecting employees from workplace discrimination and had recovered millions of dollars in settlements for workers who had experienced similar illegal treatment from their employers. Mr. Adams, employers often use subtle discrimination tactics that employees don't recognize as illegal, but our firm knows how to identify and document these violations to build strong legal cases. Walsh continued with apparent discrimination tactics knowledge. Walsh explained that her firm could immediately begin legal action against Gregory's employer to stop the discrimination and secure financial compensation for the illegal treatment he had experienced, but that immediate legal representation was essential before his employer could document reasons for potential termination. Gregory was confused because he didn't consider his workplace disagreements to be illegal discrimination, but Walsh seemed knowledgeable about employment law and claimed to have specific information about his workplace situation. I don't think I'm experiencing illegal discrimination, Gregory explained to Walsh. Can you provide specific information about what employment law violations you think are occurring and how you obtained information about my workplace situation? Walsh became more insistent when Gregory questioned her discrimination claims, asserting that most employees don't recognize illegal discrimination when it's happening and that his workplace problems definitely constituted violations of federal employment protection laws. Mr. Adams, employers are skilled at disguising discrimination as normal workplace management, but our legal experts can identify the illegal patterns that untrained employees miss, Walsh explained with apparent discrimination recognition expertise. Walsh also claimed that employment discrimination cases had strict filing deadlines and that Gregory would lose his opportunity for legal action and compensation if he didn't retain legal representation within 72 hours. Gregory felt uncertain about Walsh's claims, but decided to research employment rights legal group and employment discrimination laws before making any decisions about legal action against his employer. Gregory's research revealed that Employment Rights Legal Group was not listed in his state's Bar Association directory and had no legitimate legal credentials or verifiable law firm presence. Gregory contacted his state's Bar Association to verify attorney Jennifer Walsh's license and learned that no attorney by that name was licensed to practice employment law in his state. Gregory also consulted with his bank's Human Resources Department about his workplace concerns and learned that his disagreements with his supervisor were normal management issues that could be addressed through established workplace procedures. Gregory realized that Employment Rights Legal Group was fraudulently claiming employment law expertise and attempting to create legal problems where none existed to collect unnecessary legal fees for services that could harm his employment relationships. Gregory contacted Employment Rights Legal Group to inform Walsh that her fraudulent claims had been verified, but she continued to insist that he was experiencing illegal discrimination and pressured him to retain legal representation immediately. Gregory reported the employment legal fraud to his state's Bar Association and Attorney General's office. He learned that fake employment law scams often target employees during workplace disagreements to create unnecessary legal conflicts. The authorities explained that legitimate employment discrimination involves clear violations of specific laws and that employees should work with properly licensed employment attorneys only when genuine legal violations have occurred. Gregory learned that workplace disagreements should typically be addressed through human resources channels and that legal action should be considered only when clear employment law violations have occurred that cannot be resolved administratively. The experience taught Gregory to distinguish between normal workplace issues and actual legal violations while working with properly licensed attorneys only when legal intervention is genuinely necessary. Gregory now educates other employees about employment legal fraud and emphasizes resolving workplace issues through appropriate channels while being skeptical of attorneys who claim legal violations exist in normal workplace disagreements.